Hello, everybody, to this exciting webinar and to my home jungle where it's also 30 degrees, very appropriately. And we're going to turn up the heat today as well because this is a very hot topic. Our silvers are indeed so hot. Unfortunately, sometimes they are not. So we're going to do something about that in the next 35 minutes. I have a 13-year-old teenager who just got back from camp, and she always counts my gray hair. And the counter says that I'm nearly part of the silver generation now, 3 years to go. In this picture, though, I think I'm about 10, 11 years younger still. And that is, of course, exactly how I feel as a almost silver. I have here with me Katja Palini, at least 10 years younger. But Katja is our marketing director, global marketing director, but also content expert and really positively obsessed not only with the silver generation, but an expert on all generations for that matter. And then I have Philip de Boek with me as well. He's one of our managing partners, global client partner. So working around the cool stuff, cool brands with all generations, but also positively obsessed specifically with our silver generation, which I believe, Philip, you will be officially joining still at the end of this year. So about time we put the spotlight on this so that all of you and all of the brands don't forget about how big and important they are as a cohort. On the rules, you see Emily, colleague in the back, who is giving the instructions. You'll get the recording, so sit back and relax. Get the party going. Our presenters will be not reading the chat whilst they speak. But if you have questions, please look at the bottom right, tap your questions in the question tab. If you want to upvote a question that you think is smart to ask, you can raise a question and then we will tackle one, two, or a few at the very end. And all the other questions we will follow through at a later stage. Without much further ado, I give to you two top presenters, and they will also speak not only with years of experience and obsession with generations, but also backed with qual and quantitative research with this cohort from around the world. Let's go.
Yes, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are, or even good evening. Just to set the scene, right, on the silver generation and to explain to everyone what we are talking about and who we are talking about. It is what we call the silver generation, which is people aged over 50. And this is the definition of what a silver is. And we are on a journey, and that's because of two let's say, trends that are accelerating, which is, let's say, living longer and decline in birth rates. So the older generation is set to outgrow the younger ones, and we almost can call that the silver tipping point. The silver tipping point is not yet reached globally, and there is regions where we are close to it. But let's say on a global level, we estimate that by 2050, we will have more people older than 50 living on this planet than younger than 50 living on this planet. So that is that silver tipping point. There will be regions like Europe, like Japan, that is already much closer to this tipping point. So that's in demographic size, but also in terms of buying power. And on the next slide, we went a bit too fast, but here you see also that extrapolation or that estimation right now in 2025, the silver generation represented 35 trillion of buying power. By 2050, that will have almost tripled to close to 100 trillion. And so that is increasing in demographic size and proportion of the population, but also in terms of buying power. Let's look at more dimensions where they are forced to be reckoned with, and that is also on the political, let's say, scene. If we look at the leaders of the government, on average, that is at this point 62 years old, and this is globally, leaders of government 62. That is an increase versus last decade where it was 57. The oldest one, and we checked yesterday, and he's still alive, is the president of Cameroon, who is 93. Just to say that in times of turbulence and volatility, you see that countries and let's say and choosing leaders with more tenure over skill sometimes, and because they or both combined. Also in the business world, and if we think of the Forbes top 500, the average age of a CEO today is 58. And so all of the leaders, whether it's in the political world, leader of government, or of the large, let's say, multinational companies, they are all, let's say, silvers. So combined in all aspects of society, from demographic size, from buying power, from political power, from business power, this is a force that is, let's say, only going to increase over the next years and decades. If that is what is happening, if that is the context, why are we, and we, I would say, marketing society and market, let's say, research industry at large, so obsessed with the younger generations? And so often we are interested in what's coming next. Oh, we want to know everything about Gen Z. Oh, what about Gen Alpha? What about the next, let's say, generation? It's always about how do we recruit younger and younger consumers. It's also what we see when we analyze annual reports of clients and let's say, companies that we find publicly available, is that they often talk much more about recruiting younger consumers than focusing on, let's say, maintaining older consumers. So this is this youth obsession that we have, and that is something that we're going to talk about in this session. And so we will bring a story that is aimed to put the spotlight on the blind spot, which we call the silvers, and to reveal you more about who they truly are. And as Magali mentioned, this is based on global studies, both qualitative, quantitative, over years of following this generation. So I would like to, let's say, hand over to Katja for the next part. Oh, there is one couple of messages that I wanted to that I need to cover, but I was following the slides. I'm sorry. So if we think one step back, is that we have that obsession, and that is backed by quite some data. So I don't know if you saw it in speed, but on the previous slide, we see that in the market research industry, we see that we often silence people older than 65 years old. And when we see briefings, we see nationally representative sample, often 18 to 65, and that is typically where we cut off the fieldwork for quantitative research. Just an FYI, if this is what you do in Japan today, this screening practice, then you lose 30% of your population. So we can hardly call that nationally representative. When we now go into qualitative research, assuming that is the research that you do when you really care about the opinions of consumers, we often cut off at 40, 45. And so this is a joint responsibility as an industry and a marketing society at large, is to somehow stop silencing them and from hearing their voice, to generate insights and to validate concepts and so on and so on. Now we go into marketing investments, which is the next number that we're going to put on. And none of these numbers are going to make us look good somehow as a let's say, as a group, as a market society. We have seen the numbers in terms of the importance, the size, the buying power of this generation, but we only put 5 to 10% of our marketing budgets against them. And so the gap of possible return on investment and investment is huge when we consider this generation. There is another study that was done by Creative X, which also shows how often we depict them and how often they're featured as, let's say, a model in advertising, and that's only 4%. This is a study from 2022, meaning that only 4% of the models featured in advertising are supposed to represent people older than 50. This is not growing, by the way, this is in decline. So there is a study that has been published of more recent years that it has gone down to 2.2%. So as opposed to the trend that we showed in the first slides, we see now actually a downward trend that really kind of almost going against that stream and that current that we see. So this is already problem number one, is not showing them, and problem number two is when we show them, we often revert to stereotypes. This is just a funny example, but I don't know if anyone in the group knows, but Barbie today would be 86 years old. So she was launched by Mattel in 59 when she was supposed to be a 19-year-old, let's say, girl or woman. So right now she would be 86. If we then would look at what does Barbie look now today, and we make a joke about it, but it would be on the left, cataract Barbie. And so she doesn't see well. She also has to stop wearing heels because she wore heels too much. She needs a chair with an armrest. We have widow Barbie in the middle, who sadly lost Ken, because women tend to outlive their loved one. And on the right, we have Alzheimer Barbie. Just to show that, and this is jokingly, but this is in popular culture, how often we refer to silvers, and by reverting to stereotypes, ageism, and other practices that are not really ethical. Might be funny, but not always ethical. And we have this game that we would, let's say, encourage you to print this off as marketeers or people in the marketing industry, and almost look at, when you see depiction, which is already a great achievement, when you see a senior depicted in an advertising, to play silver bingo, meaning, let's say, how much are we reverting to a specific stereotype, whether we're talking about the frail elderly person to the cheerful retired couple on the beach. So really try to see all of these images, and I think all of them, we know that this is typically how they are depicted in advertising. We also did quite some consumer interviews, let's say, to support the story. And the next one is going to be a very, let's say, beautiful illustration of most of the things that we have already showed now in numbers.
I don't feel like I'm spoken to very often. You know, I watch television, go to the cinema more than anything else now. And I certainly don't see any advertising that's largely aimed at me. I feel it's always aimed at a younger audience, and probably an audience that probably hasn't got as much money as me. And if there is an advert aimed at me, like a cruise advert, it's always some awfully attractive couple walking on a sandy beach dressed in white linen, pointing at a cruise ship. And it's just so stereotypical and so bland and so drab that it washes over me. But they don't advertise to me in a way that excites me in my stage of life either. So
yeah. And we did a search, and after we heard this in the interview, we looked at, okay, look for images of cruise advertising, and here they are. And so what this person describes is truly one of those stereotypes that we see reflecting over and over and over again at the happily retired couple staring into the distance. Either they're on the ship or they're often also on the beach staring at the ship, but variations of exactly the same stereotype. And we also have to acknowledge that, let's say, and that's also studies that have been published more and more, is that artificial intelligence also, let's say, has somewhat this bias, which we will come back to later. But just to show that the marketing society and the society at large really is rooted in a lot of these stereotypes. So either we ignore them, we silence them, or we, let's say, present them in a very stereotypical kind of ageist, let's say, funny way sometimes.
Yes, Philip. And as you mentioned, they're not only overlooked, they're also misunderstood. And this growing generational cohort is often referred to as the silvers generation. And yes, when we hear silver, we think of gray hair, aging made visible. And there's in fact this saying, the 50-50-50 rule. And it says that at the age of 50, 50% of people have at least 50% gray hair. And this might sound reasonable, but reality is that only 6 to 23% of 50-year-olds have primarily gray hair. So the term silver is in fact a stereotype. And that's exactly what we want to challenge today. Today, we're going to bunk and bust some of the most persistent stereotypes that exist around older adults, and this grounded in real consumer evidence. Because if we truly want to understand this growing cohort, we need to start looking at them with nuance. And this is also what we found in our research. As Philip mentioned, we did a larger research piece. And as part of that, we also ran a survey with 900 consumers aged 50 and older. And so we didn't cap at 65, but we had a representative distribution across age groups. And we did this in the US, the UK, and China. And what we found is that 64% don't see themselves in the typical depiction of their generation. And what people actually want is that they want to be seen and understood as individuals. 88%, they don't want to be grouped by age. And this, in fact, grows to 92% if you look at the 70 plus group. Now, talking about age, we're not just getting older, but we're also aging better. And there is this very interesting study that has been done by Yale and the University of California. And it looks at people's biological age. So how old your body is compared to the number of birthdays you had. And so they compared people in the 80s to people 20 years later, so in the year 2000. And what they found is that people in the 2000s, they were biologically younger than their counterparts or their peers from the past. And especially with the age group of 60 to 70-year-olds, they found that that difference was about 4 years. Now, why is that? There are a couple of factors at play here. Less smoking, better healthcare, better dental care, use of sunscreen, but also fewer physically demanding jobs. But the bottom line is that aging today, it looks very different than it did a generation ago. And you can take this quite literally. I don't know if you recognize these ladies here. They're the cast of The Golden Girls that aired in the 80s, in 1985 to be precise. If I would ask you how old these ladies are, and I'm looking at the top three because we have Dorothy, Blanche, and Rose, and Estelle is Dorothy's mother. Maybe make a guess in the chat. Just pop in there what you guess their age is. But I can assure you that you probably will see, I see 70 already popping out, 72. But let me tell you this, they were in their early to mid 50s. And to us, they look a lot older, right? And that's due to what I just said before, but also we have to take into account factors like, people might look older from the past due to their hairstyle, but also, fashion trends. But even then, if you even zero that out, they look a lot older. And especially if you would compare that to the cast of And Just Like That, the sequel of Sex and the City, where we have Miranda, Carrie, and Charlotte, the same age. And they're really going through their mid 50s in stilettos and storylines and even skin that in the 80s, someone would have, that would have been 20 years younger. And so really showing how aging looks very different than it did in the past. And, you can just look at pictures from your grandparents. You will see the same thing. But we're not just looking younger, we're also feeling younger. So our research showed that in general, 79% feels younger than their actual age. And that percentage actually grows as people get older. And I really like this quote because this is something we saw that came back quite a few times in a research. This is from this man, he's in his mid 60s and he's saying, I'm in my 60s and I honestly feel a lot younger. But then, recently I catch myself, I see myself in the mirror or I see a picture and it hits me, it's that confrontation that a lot of people have. And that's because there's this gap between our actual age and our perceived age. And that gap on average is 11 years. So on average, people feel 11 years younger than they actually are. So age is, in fact, just a number. That's also what we see, where 90% says it's really their mindset that defines them. And that mindset is changing. How we see aging, how we see ourselves, it's changing. But if you look at marketing and society at large, it's still lagging. It's still not catching up with that new vision of how people see themselves and that new mindset and how people act and behave. And 75% feel there's still too many outdated stereotypes around aging. So let's debunk a couple of them. The first one has to do with our lifestyle and our activity levels. Now, as we age, of course, our bodies change. So we might not be as lean and or as strong or as fast as in our prime years, but being older, it doesn't mean that we're less active. No, we see that still when we look at the silvers, we see that 2 out of 3, they say they lead an active and an engaged lifestyle. And with that, we're not just looking at keeping yourself busy and doing hobbies. Of course, that's part of that. But it's also when it comes to physical activities and exercise. And contrary to what we might all assume and think, older generations are in fact more active than younger generations. This is an interesting piece of study from the ABC Fitness Report, and it shows that baby boomers are in fact more active than younger generations, and especially Gen Z. And that might be kind of counterintuitive or surprising to most of us. But there are a couple of reasons that can explain this. And one of the main reasons is that, baby boomers, generally may have more time. And then if you look at Gen Z, they're a generation that might be sitting long hours at their desk and so on. And we see that, in fact, also when you look at the gym population. So for a long time, the gym was kind of like the playground of the young, places filled with 20 to 30-year-olds chasing their personal best or six packs. And especially when you look at strength training, that was something that was exclusively for young athletes. But that's changing. Today, we see more and more older adults stepping into the gym, and not just for a slow walk on the treadmill. No, they are lifting weights, they're building strength. And this is also what we see in the numbers. In the US, for example, the past 2 decades, we see that seniors aged 55 and older, they are actually representing 18% of gym members, and that has grown with 230%. And we see really these fitness programs popping up, but even also specialized, gyms that are welcoming older adults and supporting them in that journey towards strength training. This is an example. It's from Detroit. It's a fitness or a gym called Gray Steel. I love that name. And really showcasing and helping people of any age building strength. And we see other examples across the globe, especially in APAC, we see many examples there. Second myth, and this one has everything to do about our outlook towards the future, because aging has often been seen as, a time to stop dreaming, stop setting goals. It's that path, into retirement. And that's also the image that a lot of people have. But what you see is that 69% has still big goals and many ambitions they want to pursue. So aging is in fact, not about slowing down or standing still. It's often also that time we see that with greater freedom, and also where people have finally the resources to invest in themselves, in personal growth, hobbies, discover passion points. And for that reason, it's often also seen as that second spring, this new phase for passion, for purpose, and for possibilities. And this is also what is really important, because research has actually shown that purpose is a key longevity metric. There's this really interesting study that has tracked 13,000 older adults in the US over 8 years. And what they found is that people with a higher sense of purpose, they actually have a lower mortality rate and risk compared to people with a lower sense of purpose. It's actually more than half, as you can see. And of course, the researchers controlled for other variables like age, income, health, and so on. But to really, demonstrate and showcase the impact of purpose on longevity. And, we see that purpose also coming back in people starting their own business later in life, the so-called seniorpreneurs. An example is the person you see on the slide. This is Brad Roberts. He retired, and then while retiring, he was connecting, spending more time with his family, his grandchildren, and he started playing pickleball. Because pickleball is a game that you can play with people any age. And what happened, he was at this game, and all of a sudden he got hit by a ball in his eye, and he had a black and a swollen eye. And then it made him realize that there wasn't any proper, eye protection. So he started a business selling eye protection for pickleball. And he was 66 years old. And pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports worldwide. And today he has sold more than 50,000 pairs in more than 50 countries. And in fact, he's not alone. In the UK, 35% of new businesses is actually started by someone aged 55 or older. And one of the top reasons that we see there coming back is that the pursuit of a passion, doing something that you couldn't do because of life demands, but also finding, having that fulfillment, that purpose in life. And we see that also on another front. Looking at purpose, we also see that coming back in divorce rates across the globe. We see that the divorce rates amongst people that are 50 and 60, between 50 and 60 is like kind of like the danger zone in your marriage. Because, there we see divorce rates booming. It's actually something that doubled and almost tripled since 1990. And it has a term. It's called like the silver divorce, the gray divorce. I also heard silver splitters. But it's really all highlighting the idea that people are ending what is for them an unfulfilling marriage. They're realizing like I have 30, maybe 50 years that I can, that I can still do things. And am I going to spend it unhappy? And that's what we see, that people see it as a chance for a new chapter in life. And we see that also at marriage rates, where it's really increasing amongst that same group. And there's, in fact, this very interesting Netflix series. It's called The Later Daters. And I haven't seen it myself, but it's following 6 singles who are aged 55 to 70 as they navigate finding love after being divorced or widowed or being single for a period of time. Now, third myth that we're going to bust today, and it's something that you may all recognize or be guilty for yourself, and is that, older adults are often stuck in the past, that they don't want to learn new things, that they're, especially when it comes to technology, that they're lagging behind. And, these are some of the memes that you might all have seen before about the technologically clueless senior, but it's actually a misrepresentation, because if you look at TikTok, this generation represents 10% of TikTok users, and there's actually the fastest growing cohort with 300%. And okay, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna take a sip of water. I'm talking too fast. But they were not born with a smartphone, but they have been part of a lot of tech adoptions. And this is also a great example. I really love this example here. There are many examples out there, but this one really gives it a great example. It's from Lewis. And as the quote shows, when he was 80, he asked himself, how do I want to finish? And he said, I want to finish strong. And that made him realize he needed to learn AI. And so that's what he's done. He is now 82 and he's studying prompt engineering. online. He's watching AI videos on YouTube, and he started his own tech startup. And that's also what we see. We see that 60%, in fact, they want to learn new things and learn a completely new skill because it excites them. Let me show you a video from one of the interviews that we conducted that really showcases this and this need for, it also bringing purpose, but also mentally that it helps in that journey and that it's changing the mindset towards aging.
2 years ago, I started with the cold water swimming. And it was something I never did. I hated water. Although I lived at the lake for 40 years in Switzerland, I hardly ever went swimming because I really don't like swimming. But that cold water swimming was like more of a challenge. It was not swimming. And apart from the fact that it's very healthy for your body, it's also quite important for your mind because the mind is most important here.
The mind is most important here. And that's what we also see when people are, tapping into a new skill, it really also energizes the mind. And now we're going to move into with that to the last myth, and that often aging is seen as this time and this stage of seriousness and declining enjoyment. But the contrary is true. It's actually the time, and I don't know if you know this, where people are most happy. There's actually a book, I don't know if you've ever seen or read it, but it's called The Happiness Curve. And it shows you how happiness has this U-shaped curve where people are, you have this optimism of youth, and then you have really that slump in middle age, and then it's starting to rise again as people in their 50s or actually of 45. Now, recently, they actually also saw that, the high and during youth is actually not present anymore. That youth, in fact, isn't as happy as they were a generation ago. But what is still stable is how happiness increases when people get older. And the reason is because our expectations, they catch up with reality. When we're younger, we measure ourselves against everything we hope to achieve. By 50, what we see is that people are like, they stop, catching up. They start feeling okay where they are in life. They stop competing. They start connecting more. And we care less about status and success and more about the things that make us happy. And so there's also this very interesting biological thing that happens in the brain. And it's that our brain, in fact, calms down. Our brain becomes less, you could say, reactive to things like stress. We also have fewer regrets, less drama. And we see that, in fact, aging is that time where it's about prioritizing joy. It's about indulgence, about living life to the fullest. And this is visible on many fronts. And even things like people make them happy is things like gaming even. And what we see is that, sorry, what we see is that in the US, for example, adults of the age of 50, they represent a third of the US gamers. And what we see is that even if you look at between 60 and 70 year olds, there we see that half of the Americans, they play some form of PC, console, or mobile game. And that's 36% at the age of 80. And it's not just solitary. This is a woman here, and she plays Call of Duty. And I love this quote. She says, "I really like it when I get this long sniper shot in. It's for her, it's pretty fun." And so again, just like what we saw before, we see that people like trying new things, new hobbies, things that make them active, that makes them energized. And that there's no age limit to play is something also Lego knows. In the past, their boxes had always like the 4 to 99, but today that's even a cap, right? You're capping at 99. And so what they've done a couple of months ago, when Sir David Attenborough he celebrated his 100th birthday, they gave the message out that they were gonna update and change the box where it would have been it would be 4 to 100 plus, because there's no age limit to play. And so we now debunked 4 myths, but there are so many stereotypes out there. And so I want to share with you a video or an ad that taps into a couple of these.
It seems the moment you turn 50, you're supposed to disappear, fade away, at your age. Let's be very clear. You're now old. Don't be bold. Don't be lively. Don't be loud. Don't be seen, you old has-been. Don't dare stand out from the crowd. Do what's expected, do what's right. Stay at home, have early nights. Conform to the norm. Take up gardening, wrap up warm. You're old, don't be bold, don't be funny, don't be tanned. Don't go there, don't do that. Don't do anything unplanned. Be vanilla, know your place. Watch TV and slow the pace. Don't be silly, don't do fashion, and for God's sake, don't do passion. Don't be different, don't have fun, especially with the young. You're a boomer, you've had a tumor. You can't have a sense of humor. Don't you fight the stereotype, don't you try something new. Don't be happy, don't be crazy, don't be fun, don't be you. And definitely don't tell them to take these cliches line by line and shove them express delivery where the sun don't shine. At Stay Sure Travel Insurance, we believe that as your age gets bigger, so should your dreams. Dream big. Stay sure.
But I think the message here for brands is really that we have to stop looking at the limitations. And that's also what Philip will tell us more about.
Yes, and I love almost the script of this commercial is contradicting the limitations and how we look at seniors today most often, and then we show, let's say, the aspirational lifestyle, and it's those two that often clash, and we need to, let's say, reframe how we look at, let's say, the silver consumers and the aging consumers. And one of the, and not only we also have to train our large language models. We did one test, and we asked ChatGPT or Copilot, any of the large language models out there, to say, okay, please drive innovation or create innovation and ideas for, let's say, silver consumers 50 plus. And this is what AI comes up with. It's very much, not only in terms of the tonality, it's very beige, it's very brown, but also just the essence of what is here. It's a lot of focusing on what you cannot do anymore. It's about, let's say, specific age care to rejuvenate. It's canes, it's nostalgia, and going back to vinyl records. So a lot of, let's say, the ideas are very biased. And that's also confirmed in studies that AI, we have been able to train them to avoid sexism, but ageism is still very much, let's say, intrinsic to the large language models that we train today. So we have to watch out that that bias is not only with us, but it's also, let's say, embedded in AI. One of the things what these innovations or these ideas do is focusing on what consumers cannot do anymore or cannot do as well anymore. We have in our survey one of the statements that we get a large majority of let's say, positive responses to. 3 out of 4 of the consumers say, I want products that help me to do what I can, not just fix what I can't. And one of the interesting elements there, and for the people listening in the food and beverage industry, there is something about sensorial, let's say, innovation. And what we often see when we think of sensorial innovation for seniors and the elderly is very much, let's say, in the negative space, and it's solving for what they cannot taste or smell anymore. And there is a biological truth. Our ability to smell and taste does decline. There are taste buds, let's say, that are disappearing and not regenerating anymore. So that's a biological truth. But if you see how a consumer words it, it's not, oh, my taste and my sense of taste and smell has gotten worse. No, they say it changed. And the video that we're going to show is one that we have showed before, but it's so spot on that we feel it's worthwhile showing again, because what it shows is reframing a decline in a biological capability or ability of a consumer, still making that aspirational and not as something, oh, here we created something for you so you can fix your problem. So this is the campaign of Bex that we're going to show next. It's a beer developed for a changing palate, not a worsening palate or a medical condition. And so this is one way to reframe something very positively for aging consumers. The next one, and I anticipate some of the questions when we brought this story in the past, is yeah, but how do we do this, focusing or be, let's say, developing great campaigns and innovations for, let's say, senior consumers, aging consumers, without alienating the younger consumers? Because we're still so obsessed with that Gen Z that we want to make sure that we don't do the right thing. And the next commercial, I think, shows that in a very great way, is to make sure that we don't isolate them and necessarily focus only on them, but that we just embed them in our broader brand narrative. So the next video is a great showcase of that.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were older? Then we wouldn't have to wait so long. Wouldn't it be nice to live together in the kind of world where we belong? You know it's gonna make it that much better when we could say goodnight and stay together. Wouldn't it be nice if we were older? Then we wouldn't have to wait so long. Wouldn't it be nice to live together in the kind of world where we belong? You know it's gonna make it that much better when we could say goodnight and stay together. Oh, wouldn't it be nice?
Yes, and we have one more to go, and this is the one that I have watched now probably 30 times, but keeps giving me goosebumps every time. Enjoy.
There's nothing I would change now.
It's far less complicated. I know what I want.
My skin still feels sensitive in a nice way. Yeah.
But because I'm comfortable in my body, I still feel sexy.
Sex is just as much fun, as sensual as it ever was.
I just feel re-energized afterwards and weak at the legs.
I also have incontinence, but it doesn't bother me. I call it my trickle of joy.
I call it my sneeze wee.
Too much? Well, it's not about you.
It's about me.
Yes, great examples of campaigns that have clearly understood, let's say, what it takes to drive empathy. But just as a call out, let's say, for brands and marketeers out there, these are just one of the happy few, let's say, good examples, while at the same time, 60% of the consumers still feel ignored or undervalued, let's say, by brands out there. So our message, let's say, our key outtake of today should be about being able to drive empathy, to see them for who they truly are, and to start obsessing with this generation for who they who they truly are, which requires understanding them deeply. And because in order to make an innovation or a campaign, as we have seen from these success cases, it does take deep, let's say, human understanding. And there is only so much we can do by telling this story, showing you the statistics and some of the verbatims. And it's almost like obsessive, let's say, empathy, the initiatives that will probably be needed, because today we are dealing with, let's say, an empathy gap. And there is two empathy gaps combined, and there is an intrinsic empathy gap. Humans, according to scientific studies, are less empathic as decades ago, so that's declining. And on top of that, we have a systemic empathy gap in the industry, because, let's say, the age of marketeers and advertising professionals is often 30 to 40 years younger than, let's say, the silver consumers that they're supposed to target. So there is just that lack of understanding, empathy that we have with this generation. So that's the call out for today, is to start obsessing with this generation, to drive empathy. And then, as some of our clients do it, and I think L'Oréal is a great showcase, they have empathy programs running to continuously connect with consumers, not only, of course, silver consumers, but all types of consumers, including, let's say, silvers. And that then leads to great advertising, as we see on the right. How often do we hear, I mean, how often, I'm not speaking for myself, but how often do we hear the line, "You look great for your age"? Like, why do we even add that line, "for your age"? A statement and that L'Oréal explicitly made in a lot of their campaigns recently for one of their innovations. So thank you, everyone. And I don't know if there's still questions, but we can also connect afterwards offline.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie, for being the brave one to ask questions. We've put some first answers in there. We don't want to keep you too long. I hope you enjoyed the session. The recording will be following. And Philip, you look great today. And Katja, you do too. I've put your email address in the chat so that people can also reach out directly. Have a good continuation, and keep those questions coming, and we'll feed you with more of our obsession with this beautiful cohort. Thank you. Sophie,
Thank you,
Imke,
everyone.
Laure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.